Frances Anne and her husband, they were also responsible for the construction of the harbour in the village of Carnlough, and they also built a castle nearby at Garran Point to provide employment during the famine years of 46 and 47. And the story goes that Frances Anne, on her travels, she saw this castle in Bourke Rheinstein and said to her architect when she came home, "Build me that at Garran Point, okay, make it so." I think it was the setting, the similarity of the setting that struck her. It was completed in 1850. Jumping on now, unfortunately we don't have much time, so it's a real whistle-stop tour. So jumping on from Frances Anne and the third Marquess, we'll jump on to the sixth Marquess and Marchioness of Londonderry. Here's a slide this is the sixth Marchioness Theresa here. So the archive, I should say, yes, most of the illustrations of the talk are from those photograph albums, that collection D4, 5, 6, 7. But the paper record relating to Theresa, 6th Marchioness of Londonderry, is D2846. So the 6th Marquess, her husband, was Lord Lieutenant of Ireland and a prominent figure in Irish unionism. His wife, Theresa, was the leading political hostess of her time and probably, a very important political figure in her own right. She was the leading Tory hostess of her day, although apparently she did, apparently about it, she had friends among liberals, and her correspondence in the archives, it's literally, it's the great and the good from the worlds of art, literature, the military, navy, army, the works, they're all there, so it's a wonderful collection. Charles and Theresa were leading figures in the opposition to campaign to Home Rule, mentioned by other speakers tonight. And here's a house party at Mount Stewart, April 1912. Theresa, Bonner Law, Edward Carson, all there. Again, jumping ahead again, sorry about this, we move on to the 7th Marquess and his wife. So there in the background, as he was then, before he inherited the title, Lord Castlereagh. This is a lovely photograph entitled The Coming of Age of Lord Castlereagh. There's his mother, Theresa, there. So Lord Castlereagh, as he was then, in 1914, he served as ADC with General Pulteney in the First World War. Edith, his wife, meanwhile, very significantly set up the Women's Legion at the time and travelled to France bringing supplies to the troops, and worked for the expansion and organisation of the Women's Legion. So a very, very important role. After the First World War, Lord Londonderry had various political appointments. Probably most significantly, in 1920, he was appointed Under Secretary of State for Air. He resigned from the Air Ministry in 1921 to take up an active role in politics in Northern Ireland, in the new Parliament that was set up. He was Leader of the Senate and Minister for Education, is best known for the ill-fated Education Bill, which he attempted to pass in 1923, the so-called Londonderry Act, which would have paved the way for integrated education, but didn't come to pass. In 1926, he resigned. Again, various political appointments before 1931, his most important position to that date, he was appointed Secretary of State for Air in the national government of Ramsay MacDonald. At the time, there was gossip and talk that he only got the job because his wife, Lady Edith, was very close friends with Ramsay MacDonald, pictured there behind her. And we have a wonderful section of D3099, is several hundred letters from Ramsay MacDonald to Lady Edith. And certainly, yes, she was his confidant. He idealised her, a very close relationship, they were very close friends. So each eve of Parliament, Lady Londonderry would host a lavish reception in their beautiful London house, a Londonderry house in London. There she is, as I say, Ramsay MacDonald behind her, Stanley Baldwin there, and with his back to the camera, Lord Londonderry, the Minister of State for Air. But Lord Londonderry threw himself into the job. He was a really enthusiastic aviator, took flying lessons. Here's the landing ground at Mount Stewart. All the family actually took flying lessons. Lady Edith and the daughters as well, they all took flying lessons. Their daughter, Lady Margaret, actually got her licence ahead of her father. He got his licence in 1933. Lady Margaret got her licence ahead of her father and married her flying instructor the following year. The parents were not delighted and the marriage did not last. Lord Londonderry also gave some of his land over to set up the first civil airport in Northern Ireland at Newtonards. Okay. He fought for the re-equipment of the RAF, but many would argue that he did not do enough to insist on the expansion number-wise of the RAF at a very critical point in European political times. He did this amazing journey by airplane in 1933-34, where he went to the major RAF bases as far away as you can see there as India. So it was an amazing flight, and we have some photographs from that flight in the photograph albums that I mentioned earlier on. So that for its time, very, very impressive. I should mention the year prior to that, Lord Londonderry was a delegate at the Disarmament Conference in Geneva as well. He was often the most senior member of the government present at the Disarmament Conference, and we have his letters from the time which provide an insight into the goings-on at the conference. So very interesting. But throughout the 1930s, here's a photograph of Goring's plane. Throughout the 1930s, Lord Londonderry laboured publicly to improve Anglo-German relations. He firmly and genuinely believed that Germany had legitimate grievances arising from the Treaty of Versailles. And he felt that France's reluctance to make concessions, military concessions towards Germany, were based on irrational fear. Like many of his background and political beliefs, Lord Londonderry also firmly believed that communism was a greater threat to world peace rather than Hitler. And he believed that right up until 1939. Between 1936 and 1938, he and his family visited Germany four times, as I say, either himself or sometimes in the company of his wife or their youngest child, Lady Mary. And they met or stayed with leading members of the Nazi administration, including Hitler, Goring and Ribbentrop. And Ribbentrop and his wife Anneliese actually stayed in Mount Stewart in May 1936. Here's a programme from the 1936 Winter Olympics. The Londonderrys were guests of the Third Reich, attended the Winter Olympics, stayed in Germany from January to February 1936. Afterwards, Lady Londonderry corresponded the same as Lord Londonderry. Lady Londonderry corresponded with key members of the Third Reich as well. Here's a snippet from her letter, her thank you letter to Hitler after attending the Winter Olympics and visiting Germany at that time. To say that I was deeply impressed is not adequate. I am amazed. You in Germany remind me of the book of Genesis in the Bible. Nothing else describes the position accurately. In 1935, June 1935, Stanley Baldwin, the then Prime Minister who had taken over from Ramsay MacDonald, dismissed Lord Londonderry as Air Minister, and later that year also dismissed him as Leader of the House of Lords, which in a way was an even greater blow to Lord Londonderry. No one had been dismissed from that position before, and he was, and it was a terrible, terrible blow to him himself. Lord Londonderry's, there's no doubt about it, his pro-German stance led to him falling out with a number of his friends and political colleagues, including his cousin Winston Churchill. This is a letter, we have a lovely set of correspondence between Churchill, cousin to Lord Londonderry, and Lord Londonderry within D3099. The originals are closed because of their values, but copies are there, they're catalogued, and they're available for everyone to order out and see. This letter was written in the aftermath of the signing of the Munich Agreement, signed on the 30th of September 1938. Winston Churchill, obviously just in terms of his beliefs, poles apart from Lord Londonderry. You know, he's trying to remain polite, but also trying to get his point across. Your policy is certainly being tried, and I see nothing for it at the moment but to await the results of Chamberlain's hopes and experiments. Lord Londonderry was delighted with the Munich agreement. He felt this was the first brave step Chamberlain had taken, and it was going to lead to the road to peace. You know, he was very, very optimistic about it. Churchill took the opposite view. I view the immediate future with the deepest anxiety, but I am comforted to feel that I have no responsibility either for the neglect of our defences or for other aspects of the government's policy. It is incredible that we should have been brought so low in 5 short years. There is plenty more to come. An earlier letter, I didn't put it up there, but another letter that struck me when I was reading through them. An earlier letter dated 6th of May 1936, Churchill suggests that Lord Londonderry's pro-German stance will probably cause him difficulties in years to come. I hope that you will not become too prominently identified with the pro-German view. If I read the future aright, Hitler's government will confront Europe with a series of outrageous events and ever-growing military might. It is events which will show our dangers, though for some the lessons may come too late. So prophetic words from Churchill. Stirring stuff really, isn't it? Lady Londonderry, sorry now, briefly, and we'll have to wrap it up, but Lady Londonderry in her own right was a prominent figure in a number of spheres. I've already mentioned her work setting up the Women's Legion. She was active in a number of war and peace charities and groups. She was also close to the leading literary lights of the time. Within D3099 we have letters to Lady Londonderry from Yeats, Sean O'Casey, John Lavery, to mention a few. So the leading literary and artistic lights, the leading political figures at the time. There's letters, as I said, hundreds of letters from Ramsay MacDonald to Lady Londonderry, Chamberlain, Churchill, Michael Collins, even one letter from Michael Collins, draft unfinished letter to Lady Londonderry. She was this incredibly magnetic personality that drew people to her, people from completely different political beliefs. You know, she just was an amazing person that way, that she could have that draw. And also the social world, Wallace Simpson, several letters from Wallace Simpson there to Lady Londonderry, talking about her relationship with the king. So it's all there. Finally, you know, before coming into PRONI, we have an excellent e-catalogue, so if you want to do your homework beforehand, and just using the numbers I gave you there, if you want to come in and look at different aspects of any of the archives, I find it easier to use the browse section of the search tool there on the website. And if you always drill down on the left, select the upper archive level, drill down, go down into the section that you're interested in. Say for instance, we were looking at D3099 bar 3 bar 35, letters from Lady Londonderry from key political figures. Select that again, and when you finally come to the end, hit on the right hand side to view, and it'll bring up the catalogue entry for that specific item. So you can do your homework beforehand and then come in and order out some of this, which I hope you'll agree with me, some of this fascinating material. Thank you very much.